At the time of her death, she was in her 20s with a child who had just been weaned. The place of her martyrdom was here in Carthage, today in modern-day Tunisia, a country that is 99% Muslim with very few Christians, but back in 203 AD, it was the center of a thriving Christian community. The Roman emperor at the time, Septimius Severus, wanted to cripple Christianity, believing that it was a threat to the Roman Empire, and he zeroed his attention and attacks on the believers here in Carthage. The governor of Carthage, Hilarion, enforced the edict from Rome, and the first to be arrested were 5 Christians who were preparing to be baptized, one of whom was Perpetua and her servant or slave, Felicitas. Perpetua was a woman of noble birth, but we have little record of how she came to be a Christian, or how long she was a Christian, or what it was like to be a Christian back then. She did keep a diary prior to her death though, so we do have some idea as to what her closing days were like. All her family was not Christian though, and her father was a pagan and openly opposed to her being a Christian, and he came to visit her in prison, trying to get her to deny her faith. She spoke back to him though in words that have been oft repeated in telling her story. She said, "Father, do you see this vase or this picture? Can it be called by any other name?" "No," he replied. "Well, neither can I be called by anything other than what I am, a Christian." In addition to the emotional torment, she suffered physical adversity with the extreme heat, rough prison guards, and the cessation of breastfeeding. Thankfully, she and the others were able to move to a better part of the prison, and she was able to breastfeed her child again. As the hearing approached, her father visited her, pleading with her to have pity on him, her mother, her brothers, and her child who would soon be motherless, telling her to give up on her pride. Though she was touched by his pleas, she was unshaken in her resolve that she could not deny her faith. As the trial started, Perpetua was the last one to be tried, with the previous 4 all declaring their faith in Jesus. As she stood up, her father burst into the room, holding her baby, saying, "Perform the sacrifice, have mercy on your child." Even Hilarianus, adjudicating, looked at her and said, "Have pity on your father, your baby, and perform the sacrifice." Perpetua simply replied, "I will not." "Are you a Christian then?" she was asked. "Yes, I am." Again, her father begged her to offer the sacrifice, and this time he was beaten into silence, and Perpetua was condemned to die and taken away. Around this time, Perpetua's servant Felicity was 8 months pregnant, and it was against the law to execute a pregnant woman. They would wait instead until after the baby had been born. However, she wanted to die with her friends rather than later on her own or with other criminals. And so they gathered together about 2 or 3 days prior to the hearing, and they prayed that she could face the beast with them, her fellow Christians. Immediately, she went into labor and had a painful birth, delivering a baby girl who was then raised by another Christian woman. As they were led out to the amphitheater right here behind me, they called out to the procurator who had condemned them, "You have judged us, but God will judge you." That day, a bear, a wild boar, and a leopard were chosen to face them, with a leopard killing one of them with a single bite. The 2 young women were stripped naked and clothed in nets and were trampled and kicked at by the wild boar. Perpetua, though, seemed unconcerned with the animal, carefully binding up her hair so as to face death with as much dignity as possible. After they had been brutalized by the animals, those who were still alive were gathered together to be killed with the sword. They each gave one another a kiss of peace, and then they were stabbed. But Perpetua was stabbed by a novice gladiator whose hand was shaking, and she did not die. She screamed loudly, then grabbed the blade and pulled it towards her throat, and in this way she embraced her death. She died with dignity, fortitude, and courage. A basilica that now lies in ruins was erected over the graves of these faithful martyrs. And Christians around the world in various denominations celebrate the life of Perpetua on either March the 6th or March the 7th. And Christians in this area for many years after her death used to gather and read excerpts from her diary. However, her greatest legacy is the innumerable Christians that she has inspired and encouraged over the years. Her own father tried to dissuade her. She gave up a life of ease and comfort. She died a gruesome death, and she gave her child to be raised by someone else. However, none of these things could shake from her the conviction that God was first in her life. In Matthew 6 verse 33, it tells us, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto us." We often assume that all these things is riches or material comfort or a good education or a good family. But what if not? What if it means a life of toil, hardship, trial, and adversity? May we put God first in our lives, no matter what lot we are given, because first is the only place that God should be. Lineage is a crowd-funded non-profit studio. We make videos, we write articles and books, and we've got a podcast. And it's all to share the stories of biblical and Christian role models in history. We uncover heroes from the past to inspire, guide, and help today's generation connect the past with the present and the future. And it's all free for you because it's been generously paid for by thousands of supporters all over the world. Your support is helping millions of people understand their identity, their purpose, and their mission in life. Crowdfunded means whatever you give, big or small, helps us accomplish our mission. You can help us make more resources by joining our mission. You can give at lineagejourney.com.